We continue now at the top of Daf Mem Gimel Amud Aleph and Meseches Zevachim. This is Zevachim Daf 43a. And the previous Amud, the Mishnah said that, let's say, for example, the Kohen, he separates the kometz by a carbon mincha, and he does that with a machsheves pigel. He has in mind chutz lizmanu, that the carbon is going to be consumed outside of the proper time. So we know, of course, that the rest of that carbon mincha, if it becomes pigel, and one eats that carbon mincha, so then he's going to be chayiv kares. But the Mishnah said if one were to eat the kometz, for example, so then that would not be a liability of kares, because we only say that it's an issue of pigel and kares on the part that was permitted by when the person did the matir. So you remove the kometz in order to be matir something else, to permit something else, which in this case is the rest of the carbon mincha. So therefore the kometz, which itself is the matir, the pigel is not chal on the kometz itself. And the Mishnah continues with other examples exactly of this. Uminchas kohanim, another example would be the carbon mincha of kohanim that is totally burned, so there's no matir over there. Uminchas kohen Mashiach, the carbon mincha of the kohen gadol. And Rashi explains, Minchas Nidvas Kohanim, this is a carbon mincha donated by the Kohanim. Kula kolol, it's entirely burned on the Mizbech. Ve'ena nikmetzes, there is no kometz, there is no fistful that's taken. Hilkach ein acher matira, therefore it's not an example where something else permits it. V'chein Minchas Kohen Mashiach, and also the mincha of the Kohen Gadol, that refers to what's called the Chavise Kohen Gadol. Shemakr b'chol yom, the Kohen Gadol would bring it every day. Machatzitza b'boker, u'machatzitza bo'erev, half of it in the morning and half of it in the evening. And the Mishnah continues, V'hadam, this also applies to the blood, because the blood itself, again, is a matir. V'hanesochim haboyin b'fnei atzman, and if you have libations that come on their own, divrei Rabbi Meir, that's what Rabbi Meir says. This is the opinion of Rabbi Meir. Rashi explains, Uminchas nesachim lo garsina. Now, by minchas nesachim, that's not the proper text. To ha-miflag pligi ba, there's a machlokas about it. V'nasan chiluk bein ba im hazevach leba b'fnei atzmo. There's going to be a distinction whether it's coming together with another carbon or it's coming on its own. V'hadam, now with regards to the blood, hu ha-matir, that is the permitter, that's the matir. So therefore, again, there's going to be no kares by that. V'hanesachim haboyin b'fnei atzmo. Now, when it comes to libations that come on their own, whether they've been donated on their own, like we say in Menachos, a person is able to donate a minchas nesachim, bein shabo biglal zevach, or let's say they came together with another carbon, you brought an animal carbon, and then together with that, this minchas nesachim, ela shehevi hayom zivcho, but he brought, let's say the carbon, the animal itself was today, unesachav lamachar, and then the libation was tomorrow, diyomar mar, because the master said, minchas that the carbon mincha and the libations af lamachar can even be brought the next day. But let's say he brought it together with the animal carbon, upigel bezevach, and then again he had a machsheves pigel by the carbon by the animal. So then nispaglu hanesachim. In that case, the nesachim, the libations, would in fact become pigel. And again, that's the opinion of Rabbi Meir, but the Mishnah continues, V'chachamim omer, but the Chachamim say, Af haboyin im habehema, even those nesachim that come together with the animal, even those we say, again, there's going to be no chi of kares in that situation. Rashi explains, V'chachamim omer, the Chachamim say, Af haboyin im habehema, means to say, Dekevan de yochol, lahakriv nesachim lamachar, since he would be able, in theory, to offer the libations tomorrow, Nimsa she'ein hazevach matir, and that's, therefore, we don't say in that case that the carbon was the matir of the nesachim likarev, that it was permitting it to be brought. Elahein matir nesatzman. Rather, the way we view it according to the Chachamim is they are their own matir, and again, if something is its own matir, then kares does not apply in terms of pigel. And the Mishnah continues, Shemen shel mitzora, with regards to the oil of the mitzora. Rabbi Shimon Omer, Rabbi Shimon says, Ein chayav and olav mishum pigel, there is no liability because of pigel by that shemen. Rabbi Meir Omer, chayav and olav mishum pigel, and Rabbi Meir says, no, there is a liability of pigel. Shedam ha'asham matiro, because the blood of the carbon asham is its matir. V'chol sheyesh lo matir, and anything that has a matir, bein la'adam, bein la'mizbech, whether it's a matir, it's a permitter for the person to consume it, or whether it's a permitter to allow it to be burned on the Mizbeach, for the Mizbeach to consume it, chayav and olav mishum pigel. So then there is a liability because of pigel in those situations. And Rashi explains, log shemen shel mitzora, the log of oil of a mitzora, shirav nechol, and again the remainder is consumed. Kedi yolef b'pirkan l'kamon, we're going to learn that later on in our parak. Ein chayav and olav mishum pigel, there is no chiv, there's no liability of pigel, again by the shemen shel mitzora, according to Rabbi Shimon. And Rashi explains, in pigel b'yasham, if again again, the person had a machsheves pigel by the carbon asham itself, lo nifgal halug, so that lug shemen is not going to be considered pigel. V'afal pi, and even though shahalug toloi ba'asham, that really the lug is dependent upon the carbon asham, k'dichsiv, as it's written, al mokum dam ha'asham, on the place of the blood of the asham. V'im lo nasan midam ha'asham tchilan, if you don't apply from the blood of the asham first, ein nesinas Hashem and klum, then the application of the oil is nothing. Afilu achi, nevertheless, kevan da adam mevi asham ha'achshav, since again a person brings his asham now, v'logo ad asar yamim, he has 10 days as far as the oil is concerned. Nimsa she'ein ha'asham matiro, so then we say that the asham is not really its permitter. V'kevan de'ein lo matir, and since it has no permitter, ein chayavin olav mishum pigel. Rabbi Shimon says there is no liability due to pigel. But Rabbi Meir says log habo im ha'asham bo bayom, if the log of shemen, if the oil comes with the carbon asham today, chayavin olav mishum pigel and pigel b'asham. So then there is a liability of pigel if the person had a pigel intention by the carbon asham. Bein lo adam bein la mizbeach, again the Gemara said if it has a matir, whether to a person or the mizbeach, o lazeh, either to this one or to that one, then there's a liability of pigel. And the Mishnah continues, ha'ola, when it comes to a carbon ola, doma matir es besar lemizbeach, even though an ola is not eaten by people, but there is a matir over there because the blood is matir, it permits the meat of the carbon ola to be consumed by the mizbeach, so that's considered to be something which has a matir. And furthermore, va'ora la kohanim, it also permits the hide to go to the kohanim. And ola sa'of, with regards to the bird carbon ola, dama matir es besar lemizbeach, its blood is considered a permitter of its meat to the mizbeach. And chatas oaf, when it comes to the chatas oaf, the bird carbon chatas, dama matir es besar la kohanim, its blood is considered a permitter of its meat to the kohanim. Parim hanisrafim, now with regards to the bulls that are burned, usi'irim hanisrafim, and with regards to the goats that are burned, daman matir es emurein li karev, again the blood is a matter of their sacrificial portions to be offered on the mizbeach. Rabbi Shimon says, Kol she'eno al ha-mizbeach ha-chitzon keshlomim, anything that is not brought on the outer mizbeach, like a carbon shlomim, ein chayav and olam mishum pigel, there is no liability due to pigel. And Rashi explains, Dama matir besar lemizbeach, again the blood of a carbon oled permits its meat to the mizbeach, techsiv, as it's written in the pasuk, v'zarku, the blood is thrown, v'hadar v'archu, and then it talks about the meat on the mizbeach. And Rashi continues, V'ora la kohanim, the blood also permits the hide to the kohanim, or ha'ola sherekrivu ein lo elo la'achar zrika, again that or ha'ola, that happens after the zrika, that it goes to the kohanim. Chatas ha'of, when it comes to a bird carbon chatas, begamar mefarish minayin, denechal the kohanim, the Gemara will explain from where do we know that it's eaten by the kohanim. Domon matir emurein li karev, in the blood, it permits the sacrificial portions to be offered, lefikach, therefore again, pigel be'emurim, if there's a pigel intent by the emurim, by the sacrificial portions, b'shas avodas adam, at the time of the avodas adam, meaning when there's the avodas adam, the avodah that involves the blood, the person has an intention with regards to the emurim of outside of the proper time, nispaglu parim, so then these parim are going to be considered pigel, these bulls will be pigel. And finally, the Mishnah brought the opinion of Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon aparim hanisraf and polig. Rabbi Shimon is arguing with regards to the bulls that are burned, and he says, Kol shein matan damo al hamizbeach hachitzon kishlamim. Anytime you don't apply the blood to the outer mizbeach, again the parim hanisrafim, those were inner carbon chatoses. So anytime the blood is not applied in the outer mizbeach like a shlamim, shepigol ksib behu, because that's where pigol is written, meaning it's written by shlamim. Ein chayav and olam mishum pigol. Then there's no liability of pigol, and so therefore Rabbi Shimon is arguing by parim hanisrafin. And again, the parim hanisrafim, that generally refers to the parham davar shel tzibur and similar kinds of karbanos that are parim, again talking about inner carbon chatos, and seirim hanisrafim, that generally refers to the higo that's brought for the communal sin of avodah zarah. And the Gemara says, Amar Ula says, Kometz pigel shehelu al gabe ha-mizbeach, if you have a kometz that was pigel, that was offered up, that was burned on the mizbeach, paka pigulo mimenu, the pigel goes away from it. And the logic is, im acherim mevi lidei pigel, if it can bring others to pigel, again, when you separate the kometz, let's say, with an intention of consuming the carbon outside of the proper time, so the carbon becomes pigel, it causes the carbon to be pigel. So huatzmo lo kol shekain, it itself, certainly, it should be pigel, and this seems seems to be a contradictory statement in and of itself, because Ula starts off saying that the pigul goes away, and then he seems to give a logic that says that it should be considered pigul. And so the Gemara says, "My kamar, what exactly is Ula saying?" And Rashi explains, "Paka pigulo mimenu," the pigul goes away from it. L'kamon mefarish l'may hilchas paka. The Gemara later will explain what we mean over here in terms of practical halacha paka, that the pigul goes away. What does that mean? And again, the Gemara asks, "My kamar kaboy l'meimar." He seems to be wanting to say paka pigulo mimenu, that the pigul goes away from it. V'nosav taima debali de pigul. Then he gives a reason that would really be a reason why it should be pigul. So what exactly is Ula saying? And the Gemara says, "Hachi kamar." This is what Ula is saying. Imeino miskabel. If it's not accepted in some fashion, you're burning this kometz on the mizbeach, this fistful of the carbon mincha on the mizbeach. If it's not being accepted, so hey, how could it be that it causes others to become pigul? It can't cause the carbon to be pigul unless in some way that burning on the mizbeach was accepted. That actually is what Ula means. And Rashi explains, Im eino miskabel b'haktor, if it's not being accepted when it's burned, so heich mevi acher l'idei pigul, how does it bring others to pigul? Hamaktir kometz, amenas sheyochel shirayim l'mocher, again somebody burns this kometz on the condition to eat from the remainder of the mincha tomorrow outside of the proper time. Heich mincha mispagelis, how can that mincha become pigul? Im ein haktor asu haktor, if the burning is not a burning. V'hachi kamar, and this is what he's saying, hu atzmo lo kol shekein sheyiskabel, certainly it should be accepted. If it's being accepted that it causes others to be pigul, so it itself, it must be accepted to some degree. That's what Ula was trying to say. And the Gemara continues and says, so my kamashmalan, so what specifically is Ula teaching us? When Ula says, paka pigulo mimenu, which is a way of saying it's being accepted at some level, what does he mean to say? If he simply means to say that if somebody eats the kometz, there's no liability for eating the kometz in terms of pigul. But Tanina, that's what we learned already in our Mishnah. The following things, there's no liability to pigul. HaKometz v'hakatores v'halavonu minchas l'kohanim u'minchas kohen Mashiach u'minchas nesachim v'hadam. All of those things listed in the Mishnah, and one of them was kometz. So that can't be what Ula is saying. Ella, rather, what Ula is trying to teach is the olu, that once it goes on the mizbeach, lo yerdu, it shouldn't come down from the mizbeach. But the Gemara says, Tanina, we learned that as well in a Mishnah. It says, halon v'hayotze v'hatame v'shenishchar chutz l'zmano v'chutz l'makomo. If it was slaughtered again outside the proper time, outside the proper place, that's your example of pigul. Im alu lo yerdu. If it goes up on the mizbeach, it doesn't come down. V'yela. So maybe Ula's teaching dim yerdu, that even if it came down from the mizbeach, yalu, it should go back up on the mizbeach. But hanami Tanina, that also was learned in a Mishnah. It said kashem shem alu lo yerdu, just like if it went up on the mizbeach, it doesn't come down. Kachem yerdu lo yalu, that actually if it comes down, likewise it should not go back up on the mizbeach. So that cannot be what Ula is teaching. And so the Gemara says lo no tzrich, it's necessary shemoshla bohen ha'or. What it means is once the fire rules over it on the mizbeach, the fire is taken over. So then when it comes down, Ula is teaching that it actually is brought back up onto the mizbeach. But the Gemara says to that, Hanami Amra Ula Chadasivna. But even that Ula has already stated one time. The Amar Ula, because Ula said, Lo Shanu Ela Shelo Mashla Behen Ha'or. That's only true if the fire hasn't taken hold of it. Aval Mashla Behen Ha'or. But if the fire has taken hold, Yalu, so then it goes back up on the Mizbeach. And the Gemara says to that, well, Ula did already teach it, but nevertheless, Ma'u Detema, what might you have said? Hani Mili, these words are true. And Rashi explains, again, what exactly is Ula teaching? Ila meimra, if it means to say, Demachal mimenu acharei sha'ala, that if he eats from it after it went up on the Mizbeach, ein chayav and all of kares, there's no liability of kares due to pigul. Taninon, we learned that in our Mishnah, Develav olanami, ein chayav and all of, even if it didn't go up on the Mizbeach, we're not going to say there's a liability in terms of kares. Elulahachi, ahani pekia, so maybe rather what Ula was saying was that the pigul goes away, meaning, the kevan sha'ala, lo yered, that once it goes up on the Mizbeach, it doesn't come down. But Tanina, but we learned that in the Mishnah also. The Mishnah lists that it's slaughtered outside the proper time, the hainu pigul, which is pigul, and it says over there, once it goes up, it doesn't come down. Halon, another case over there was basar halon, that's the meat that's left overnight. So ella hani pekia shem yered la'achar shehelu yachzor v'yala. Maybe what he's teaching rather is Ula saying that if it comes down after it was put on the mizbeach, it has to go back up on the mizbeach. And the Gemara said to that, Tanina belav hachi. We learned that in a Mishnah, and the Shinuyei Nuschos changes the girsa to Tanina dilav hachi. We learned in a Mishnah that that's actually not the case. And so then the Gemara said, Lo no tzricha, it's necessary. Ha de'ula, what Ula was saying was to teach as follows. Elashem moshla bo ha'or, if it went up on the Mizbeach and the fire ruled over it, and the fire took hold of it. V'yashmein, and it's teaching us the nasa lachmo shal Mizbeach, that it already comes like the bread of the Mizbeach, so to speak. V'afilu yerdu yalu, even if they came down, it has to go back up. V'yahida katani lo yalu, when it says it shouldn't go back up, b'shalo moshla bo ha'or, that's when the fire did not take hold of it. Lo shanu, again, we only learned im yardu hanach psulin misha'alu lo yala, that if it comes down, it shouldn't go up. Again, Ula said we only learned that in a case where the fire didn't take hold, but if the fire took hold, we do bring it back up to the Mizbeach. Ula already taught that once, and the Gemara said no, because what might you have said, Hani Mili, that is only true, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Mem Gimel Amid Beis.